Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a fiercely dynamic window of time between 1615 and 1629, when an accidental island settlement completely transformed into a self-sustaining crown colony. It's a period that literally set the stage for centuries of global impact. Okay, so what do wild pigs, William Shakespeare, and the survival of the Jamestown colony all have in common? I know it sounds like some kind of historical riddle, right? But it's actually the true story of colonial Bermuda. We are going to connect all of these fascinating dots today, unpacking a story of pure survival, incredible economics, and some seriously surprising cultural ripples. Here's our roadmap for today. 1. Birth of a crown colony. 2. Hogge money. 3. Laying the foundations. 4. The dark roots of slavery. And 5. Jamestown and Shakespeare connections. Basically, we'll be examining the economy, the super unique early currency, the building of society, the tragic origins of institutionalized slavery, and the enduring cultural legacy of this era. Let's kick things off with Section 1, Birth of a Crown Colony, focusing on independence and the economy. To really understand Bermuda's unique start, you have to compare it to Virginia. By 1615, the Virginia Company was floundering. They were nearly bankrupt. Meanwhile, 118 London investors got together and formed the new separate Somers Isles Company, also known as the Bermuda Company, for £2,000. And unlike Virginia, they created a self-supporting enterprise that was actually profitable right out of the gate. You can see that official stamp of approval right here in the 1615 coat of arms of the Bermuda Company. Operating under King James I, the colony was perfectly positioned to turn a serious profit, and it quickly outpaced Virginia as a highly lucrative tobacco plantation. Moving right along to Section 2, Hogge money, the first coins. So, with the colony finally finding its economic footing, a totally new problem popped up. How on earth do you transition away from tobacco as your main medium of barter? The solution was these pieces from 1615, which were actually the very first British colonial coins ever minted. They featured a wild hog on the obverse and the famous Sea Venture ship on the reverse. King James I actually granted special permission to mint the specific coinage over in London just for the colony to use locally. Now, this hogge money was intentionally pretty crude. They were stamped from low-grade copper with just a thin silver wash to prevent people from exporting them. And they honored the feral pigs that kept the early castaways alive. But here is the real economic kicker. Their value was tied to the weight of tobacco, not the actual metal content. Because the intrinsic value was way below the stated value, the colonists just rejected them outright, and they were entirely phased out by 1624. So naturally, nobody wanted them back in the 1600s, but today, total plot twist. Because they were so crudely made and that thin silver wash just wore right off in the salty island air, very few readable examples actually survived. That makes them incredibly prized by modern collectors. In fact, a single Somers Island sixpence sold at a New York auction back in 2015 for exactly the staggering amount, $70,500. All right, Section 3, Laying the Foundations, covering infrastructure and governance. The physical layout of modern Bermuda really took shape here, and it's all thanks to a surveyor named Richard Norwood. Amazingly, the guy mapped the entire island chain by canoe. He divided the land into 8 tribes, which are today's parishes, and subdivided those into shares for the investors. Those canoe surveys established land titles that still define Bermuda's map today. At the exact same time, the colony was passing some of the New World's earliest conservation laws, stepping up to protect native cahao birds and turtles. Things were moving fast. Between 1619 and 1621, development absolutely exploded under Governor Nathaniel Butler. They started construction on the State House, the very first civilian stone structure, which was incredibly bound by mortar made out of lemon and turtle oil. Even more importantly, on August 1, 1620, the first Bermuda Parliament convened inside St. Peter's Church, which officially introduced representative democracy to the island. And of course, they had to protect all of this new development. Southampton Fort, which was completed in 1621, is a prime example. Realizing that the local limestone wouldn't burn like cedarwood would, Governor Butler commissioned 10 masonry forts by 1622. These were absolutely vital for protecting the new colony from the Spanish treasure fleets that were passing dangerously close by. This brings us to Section 4, the dark roots of slavery. We need to talk about how, as the colony expanded its agricultural ambitions, It simultaneously institutionalized a deeply tragic and brutal system of human bondage. The historical record here paints a really grim progression. Back in 1616, the ship Edwin arrived carrying the first enslaved individuals, an Indian and a black man, who were brought over for specific skills, like pearl diving. By 1617, unofficial records show enslaved people actually outnumbered white settlers. As this population grew, the government started enacting strict color-based restrictions, which eventually sparked Bermuda's very first slave uprising on Christmas Eve in 1629. All of this culminated in Act 12 of 1622. You really need to understand the weight of this. It was the first English language law globally to specifically restrict black individuals, forbidding them to barter or trade without a master's consent. This one act effectively transformed indentured servitude into life servitude, officially cementing the horrors of chattel slavery through color-based legal restrictions. We're moving now into Section 5, Jamestown and Shakespeare Connections. Let's shift our focus a bit to see how this small island's development rippled outward, profoundly impacting North America and, honestly, global culture as a whole. It's wild to think about, but Bermuda wasn't just surviving on its own. It was literally keeping North America afloat. In 1610, castaways arriving from Bermuda brought supplies that actually saved a starving Jamestown colony. And later, in 1621, Governor Butler sent Jamestown 2 massive cedar chests filled with a strange, totally new crop. Yep, it was the very first shipment of potatoes ever seen by colonists in North America. Meanwhile, back across the Atlantic, the harrowing 1609 wreck of the Sea Venture on Bermuda's reefs had completely captivated London's literary circles. The story was everywhere, and it eventually found its way right into the legendary 1623 First Folio of William Shakespeare's collected plays. Historical accounts from the survivors, specifically a gripping document written by William Strachey detailing the fierce storm and the providential delivery of the castaways onto the islands, provided the direct source material for Shakespeare's masterpiece, The Tempest. Shakespeare basically wrote the play mimicking the exact events of the Sea Venture, bringing this incredible historical journey full circle from an Atlantic shipwreck to the greatest stages in London. So we have to ask, how does a tiny, accidental island settlement manage to shape the literature, the survival, and the economy of an entire continent? It is absolutely incredible to think about how much history pivoted on these exact shores between 1615 and 1629. From pioneering early representative democracy and minting the first colonial coins, to sustaining the earliest American colonies and even inspiring Shakespeare, all while simultaneously laying the tragic groundwork for chattel slavery. I hope this explainer has given you a really clear, structured view of these complex foundational years and leaves you wondering what other massive historical ripples started on tiny, accidental shores.